Dylan sits patiently, waiting for the doctor to reveal the test results. She tells him he has tested positive for chlamydia, but explains it isn't a big issue if he gets the appropriate treatment. She warns that, if untreated, it can cause infertility, so he needs to contact his previous partners. She then asks him to take off his pants so she can properly examine his genitals. Over lunch with his friend Luke, who gives him a friendly lecture about the infection, Dylan draws up a list of partners he's been with over the past 11 years since he lost his virginity. Luke wants them to go have some fun instead, but Dylan wants to do the right thing by calling some of the women and even visiting others. He decides to start calling in alphabetical order, beginning with Abigail, then goes down memory lane first. Dylan and his girlfriend check into a hotel as guests for a wedding, and he tries to make the conversation with the receptionist fun, but his girlfriend isn't in the mood. Even when they get to their room, she still isn't interested in his dry jokes or attempts to be nice. With Luke preparing alongside Evie, he expresses his displeasure at how fast Dylan is taking things with his new girlfriend. At the wedding, as the priest joins the couple, Dylan tries to hold his partner's hand, but she rejects the move, constantly shifting her hand away. He even suggests they recreate the wedding scene soon enough, but she shuts it down immediately. As they continue talking, he finds out she is dumping him, but leaving an opening for future intimacy. Dylan struggles to keep his voice down, and his hushed tone becomes as loud as the priest's, drawing attention to them. Helen and Angus are finally joined together, and as they take pictures outside, Helen, ever in control, dishes out instructions to her groom. Dylan and Luke sit on the ground, while the heartbroken Dylan talks about the constant woes he faces in relationships. Evie joins them, and as they chat, Luke is insensitive to Dylan's pain, making jokes that vex him and cause him to walk away. At the wedding reception, Dylan and his now ex sit together, but while he is still in shock, she shows no empathy toward what he's going through. Luke's plan works as he had switched the singles tables earlier, putting himself and the single ladies at one table and leaving the men at another all by themselves. While he has fun with the ladies, the guys complain about the strange seating arrangement. As they head out for more fun, Dylan's ex is already moving on, getting close to another guest, and Dylan watches in frustration. Luke steps in and urges him to stop sulking so he can enjoy the night. The couple meets Dylan and Luke, and after a lighthearted chat, where Helen sternly opposes Angus's plan to drink, Dylan reveals he has broken up with his partner, and immediately becomes sad. Depressed, he tries to compliment their marriage by mentioning that Angus once went out with their friend Evie, which angers Helen. The groom signals him to stop, but Dylan doesn't catch it on time and keeps talking until the comper's announcement distracts everyone. As the couple dances, Helen can't stop questioning Angus about his past with Evie, and none of his explanations satisfy her. His claim that they are just friends doesn't sit well with her, and she refuses Angus's attempt to kiss her. In the toilet, Angus scolds Dylan for saying such things in front of his wife, but in that moment, a realization hits him that he might have made a mistake marrying Helen. Dylan tries to talk him out of it, but Angus doubles down and begins drinking. Helen dislikes that Angus was ever with other women, even though she had numerous exes attend the wedding. Dylan urges him to let go of those thoughts and focus on the woman of his dreams, but Angus walks off, implying that the woman of his dreams is Evie. He's drinking in a corner when Evie meets him and asks a question, but Helen appears. As the photographer for the day, Evie offers to take a couple shots, but although Helen stays for the pictures, her expression is tense and boiling. Evie tries to make her smile for the camera, but Helen snaps, accuses her of flirting with Angus, and storms out. Evie is stunned, but Angus tells her he misses her and plants a kiss on her cheek. Dylan returns to the field where Luke tells him to step up and talk to some ladies. Dylan says he already has plans and approaches a priest. Luke then goes to the bridesmaid, who can't take her eyes off him, and she wonders why he's so focused on the women. Just then, the bridesmaid's phone rings, and it's Helen, so she leaves. Luke identifies his next target and walks up to her, and the priest notices, even jokingly telling Dylan to take notes from his friend. She then suggests he dates the photographer, but that can't happen because Evie is his best friend. Helen, still angry, drags Angus to a corner to scold him, but it backfires when the bridesmaid accidentally calls her names, making her storm out again. The priest and Dylan are in the kitchen talking and getting a little close. Dylan praises her, but Evie, searching for Camilla, bursts in to pull Dylan aside. She knows things are escalating between the bride and groom and wants them to help sort things out. She will talk to Angus while Dylan speaks with Helen. Dylan meets the bride and explains that the only reason Angus didn't mention Evie was because he values their relationship and wanted to keep distance from his past. He assures her that Angus likes her for exactly who she is, and this softens Helen, who lets out a bright smile. Evie and Angus enter a room while discussing the issue and accidentally walk in on a couple making love. The scene reminds Angus of the time he and Evie had an affair, but she tells him to focus on building his new marriage instead of dwelling on the past. Everyone steps out to wave the couple goodbye when Helen tells Evie there was no one named Camilla. She made her search for an imaginary person because she resented her. Angus, now very drunk, keeps making a mess of himself in the convertible. He steps out to pee, and after a brief argument in which Helen insults his manhood, he returns to the car, but then throws up. Fed up, Helen calls the bridesmaid whom Luke plans to sleep with to join her. In that moment, Angus pulls himself together, gets into the car, and they drive off. Dylan's ex, who is now with another man, meets Dylan and takes the room key from him, pulling the new guy away by his tie. Another bridesmaid approaches Luke, and he excitedly prepares for another hookup. The priest meets Dylan, takes back her earlier comment about learning from Luke, kisses him on the cheek, and leaves. Luke is thrilled that his friend might have something going on with the vicar. With his ex still using their room, Dylan hangs around the reception. He starts talking to the receptionist, who keeps him company. When she introduces herself as Abigail and flirts with him a little, they end the night in her room. Meanwhile, Evie is in her room, unable to stop looking at pictures of Dylan on her camera. Dylan returns from his memory lane. It's been 3 years since that event. Luke drags him to a party, which turns out to be Evie's, and she is all cozy with her fiancé. Dylan feels bad seeing Evie taken, and even wipes his eyes as if wiping away a tear. Luke insists he still has time to make a move. But instead, Dylan steps outside and calls Abigail, leaving her a message. Luke storms into the room and wakes Dylan up, telling him that Angus has been doing too much by comparing everything that happens around him to what Helen would do. It's a tricky situation because Angus has temporarily moved in with them without really saying so, and Dylan now has the responsibility of talking to him. He meets Angus asleep, and when he wakes him, Angus calls him Helen. Dylan asks him to move into Evie's former room, but Angus thinks it's unnecessary since he'll be leaving soon. Dylan reminds him that he has been around for 3 months, hinting he doesn't see signs of him leaving anytime soon. Angus asks about Evie's party with Mal the day before, then reminds Dylan how drunk he was and how he ended up calling a lot of women to apologize. Dylan checks his phone and finds a voicemail from Anna responding to his calls, where he was crying and not saying anything. They go down memory lane. Luke has to meet Cleo, his new crush, but since she's sophisticated, he wants to show more than he normally does. He doesn't think he can pull it off alone, so he needs one of his friends to join him, and Evie picks Dylan to go. As they enter the restaurant, Luke gives Dylan his job description: tell jokes, say nice things about him, and create distractions when needed. They find Cleo and Anna, her friend, and the 4 of them hit it off, with Anna asking most of the questions and Dylan answering most of them. In a short while, Luke and Cleo silently decide they need to use the restroom and rush off. The 2 left at the table agree their friends have gone to have some fun in the restroom and begin talking about it, with Dylan mentioning the time he had it in a ladies' toilet. As Dylan and Anna get closer, Luke and Cleo return, thirsty. Luke wants to leave for reasons Dylan already knows, but Dylan is enjoying his time with Anna and wants to stay. He makes up an excuse to keep them back. Even though Cleo wants them to stay, Luke signals that he really needs to leave based on their plan, so Dylan gives in. Luke gets home, and Evie asks how the date went. He says he had a good time with Cleo, and that they made love in the toilet. She wonders where Dylan is, and Luke says he stayed back to talk to Anna, and he's sure they're getting intimate at that moment. Evie hears this and feels bad, but says nothing. Dylan walks Anna out and asks her on a date, or at least to have dinner with him, but she thinks he's too young for her. He jokes that he'll look older in a suit and pleads with her to consider it. As she decides to ask Cleo first, the 2 share a quick kiss, and Anna agrees to a date. Dylan gets home and begins preparing dinner. Evie teases him about having an older lady over, but he doesn't care. Luke is annoyed that Cleo will be coming too, since he worked hard to keep her away. He thinks that if she sees this side of him, she'll reconsider their affair. Evie wants Luke to give the lady a chance, saying maybe she'll love him for who he is, but he's sure she won't, especially after seeing how he lives. Evie opts out of the dinner because she has work to do, but Dylan prefers she attends, mentioning it will only last 4 hours. This annoys Luke, who storms out to go make his room presentable for Cleo's first visit. Luke quickly tries to tidy his scattered room, but before he makes real progress, there's a knock at the door. Anna and Cleo have arrived. He lets them in, takes their coats, and awkwardly throws them on the floor before picking them up and placing them on a chair. He gives the ladies a tour of the house, starting with Dylan's room, then Evie's, where all his things are now placed, and she covers for him. He takes the ladies to his own room, which looks clean and well kept, and Anna decides the tour isn't over, asking him to come inside and close the door. In the kitchen, Dylan talks to the ladies about his plan to get his own apartment. Evie is confused and asks when he started thinking about that. As they almost start going back and forth, they hear loud moans from the room Luke and Cleo are touring. Anna feels a way about the moans and suggests they move to the sitting room. In the room, Luke and Cleo have just finished having sex, and while in each other's arms, she asks him to tell her more about his family. He refuses with flimsy excuses. Unsure where the conversation is heading, he insists they go join the others for dinner. At the dining table, Dylan serves the meal, but Evie isn't pleased with what was prepared. Luke is crashing, snapping at little things. The electricity goes out, and Luke suggests the ladies leave since dinner can't continue. But Dylan wants to find a way, because he's determined they eat what he prepared. He gets candles and sets them up, but when Anna suggests they leave to prepare for the next day, Luke agrees. While Dylan disagrees, Anna needs a torchlight to find her bag, and Evie says she has one, so Luke joins her to look for it. In her room, he finds a vibrator and mocks her. They return, and as the guests search for the bag, Luke continues melting down. When they find the bag, Anna realizes her car keys are missing, and panics because her presentation cards are in the boot. Dylan thinks they can stay while they help her with her presentation, but Luke tackles him to the ground to shut him up. Evie knows what's going on, so she offers a compromise to settle both of them. Evie and Dylan go to the neighbor's house to ask to use his oven, but the man is rude and doesn't even acknowledge them as neighbors. Dylan pushes, but the neighbor declines, calling them burglars. Meanwhile, Luke is in Evie's room looking for her stove when Cleo shows up to help. She finds adult movies, and Luke claims they're all Evie's before calling her immoral. Cleo says it's wrong to call anyone who watches such things immoral, and Luke, trying to please her, misunderstands and says the movies are his. Cleo clarifies her point and questions why he watched them as well, and Luke turns his words into a joke. Evie and Dylan step out to get something for dinner. She suggests walking by the river and getting what they need, reminding him it would be a nice walk, but he just wants to return to his guests. They return, and Luke, who has been hiding, pops out and announces a problem. Cleo has decided not to go. In a corner, he tells Evie he can't have her stay over because it would mean answering lots of questions. He fears Cleo will find out too much about him and ruin his chances of continuing their fling. Cleo steps out of the bathroom, having heard everything. Luke apologizes to her and offers to tell her everything she wants to know. He says he dislikes when women he likes return the favor, then continues rambling. Dylan enters his room and finds Anna there. She has located her keys. He apologizes for hiding earlier and says he only wanted her to stay for dinner. Anna gets emotional at the gesture, and they begin kissing while Evie, who heard everything, stays by the door, upset until the electricity returns. Luke continues rambling about strange things, fetishes and preferences, which stuns Cleo. She eventually gets up to leave, promising never to see him again. Anna and Dylan finish making love, and she tells him they can't continue the affair because of their age difference. She wants someone ready to settle down and have kids soon. The next morning, Anna is fast asleep, and Evie is still frustrated when Mal, Anna's friend, whom she texted to bring spare car keys, arrives. Back in the present day, Dylan calls Anna, who is in a conference and has her phone on loudspeaker. He tells her he has chlamydia and must have given it to her. She tries to deny knowing him, but he insists they do, reminding her of the time they made love at his place. Embarrassed, Anna abruptly hangs up. He admits saying such things over the phone can be awkward, and decides to meet everyone face to face. Just then, Abigail calls, and they set up a meeting. Luke and Dylan are at the hospital when Jane walks in. They're all surprised to see each other, and when Jane wonders why he's there since he already got his results, Dylan says they're simply waiting for someone else. They go back 10 months earlier. Luke runs frantically into the house and begs Dylan to drive him to Alona's party. Dylan just wants to chill at home and questions why Luke bought a car, but still refuses to get a driving license. Luke pleads that he's waited for this chance to shoot his shot with Alona, and after plenty of rambling, the two slip into a strange emotional mode where Luke tells a dramatic story that gets both of them in tears. When they're done talking, the doorbell rings and Luke goes to get it. It's Evie, freshly dropped off by Mal, who promises to pick her up later. Luke refuses to let her go in, saying both he and Dylan will accompany her to Alona's party. On the way, Luke talks about how he once kissed Alona years ago, but never got the chance to sleep with her. He's fantasized about that day ever since, and even wrote her name on a condom that he kept safe. He also wrote on his bucket list that he wants to make love to her one day, then brings out the list he has been updating for years. He urges Dylan to drive faster because he's sure Ilona won't stay single for long, maybe not even a day. They arrive at the house, and as they enter, Luke sees Ilona coming down the stairs and is stunned. After pleasantries, Ivan and Cressida appear. Cressida immediately shows interest in Dylan and even hands him her card. Evie bursts into laughter, causing Cressida to ask why, and Evie says she just finds complimentary cards funny. Dylan walks away, and so does Cressida, leaving Ivan and Luke to trade insults. Ivan calls Luke an old-school nickname to mock him, and Luke fires back by referencing a popular story about Ivan messing up during sex back in school. They move to a corner, make peace, and begin talking about Ilona being single. They both want her and decide to go after her without fighting each other. Outside on the field, Evie and Dylan talk about how the party hasn't really welcomed them, and they decide they must find their joy. Since she hasn't seen her best friend in a while, she wants them to catch up. She brings out Luke's bucket list and wants them to do everything on it, and Dylan agrees. Luke and Ivan sit beside Ilona and listen to her talk about her breakup. Ivan tries to get the upper hand by saying he's been there for her, but Luke cuts in and promises he's available for any support she needs. Ivan gets jealous when Luke pats her leg, so he does the same. Ilona enjoys their company and wonders why they weren't close in school. Ivan cracks a joke and Ilona laughs, giving him her full attention and a flirtatious look, which irritates Luke. Evie and Dylan are determined to complete Luke's bucket list, and after making a weird meal and ticking it off, Dylan heads to a guy, talks to him briefly, and kisses him without consent. The battle for Ilona's heart continues in the sitting room. Ivan gives her a photo book filled with childhood pictures, and while she loves it, she wonders how he got a certain picture she never posted online and kept only on her phone. He seems to be winning until Luke brings out a small bag containing figs in a jar. He reminds her of their school trip to Greece and how she fell in love with those figs at a store. He says he visited Greece too, saw the figs, bought them, and kept them, without having proper thoughts for it, and now the figs are finally in the right hands. The party gets intense. Evie continues completing the bucket list and challenges some men to a drinking competition. Cressida, who says she has her own to-do list for the night, stays close and tries to flirt with Dylan, even rubbing her hand on her chest, but Evie walks by and pulls him away. Next on the list is jumping out of a moving car. They commit to it, give each other high fives, and once the car moves, Dylan jumps out. He's shocked when he sees Evie has jumped too, allowing the car to crash. They blame each other but try to fix the side mirrors of the other parked car when Ilona's brother shows up. To protect them, he takes them to the garage and asks for a favor to keep quiet. He says he wants to see some bare bodies, and when Evie refuses, the boy clarifies that it's even Dylan's body he wants to see. Dylan hesitates, but Evie loves the idea and urges him to take off his shorts. He does, the boy is stunned, and Evie is pleased with the view. Back at the party, Ivan begins breakdancing and impresses everyone, especially Ilona. Luke takes over the dance floor and tries to top Ivan's performance with a weird but impressive routine that wins the crowd. Ilona is blown away, and Ivan quietly concedes defeat and sneaks out. Luke and Ilona find a room, begin kissing, and fall on the bed. She asks for protection, and of course Luke has one with her name written on it. They finish making love and lie in each other's arms while Ilona excitedly talks, making Luke nervous. She goes to bring their school photo book, and when Luke sees it, he notices she has a rare mocking picture of him, clearly taken by her and apparently spread by her back then. This means she coined the nickname everyone used to insult him, which angers him. He gets up to leave and reveals before walking out that the figs weren't from Greece. At the garage, the boy pushes his blackmail further by asking Dylan to dance for him, but Dylan refuses. Evie then notices Cressida's card, picks it up, and gives it to the boy, telling him to send the bill for the car repairs. The boy reluctantly agrees and leaves them alone. Dylan asks for his clothes, but Evie hides them. As he tries to get them, they end up close to each other and share a kiss. Outside, Ivan meets Luke and praises his performance, calling him a worthy winner. Luke says Ilona isn't worth it, and reveals she was the one who gave him the humiliating nickname back in school. Evie and Dylan wake up without clothes on, and wrapped in each other's arms on a small couch in the garage, and he feels bad about what has happened between them. Evie thinks he's overthinking it, and is hurt that he can't just enjoy the moment. She gets ready to leave while ignoring his apologies and pleas. On the silent drive home, she feels uneasy, asking them to turn on the radio, and turn it off almost immediately. When she arrives at Mal's place, she walks straight inside to bathe. Back in the present at the hospital, Evie steps out into the reception. She sees Dylan's ex, and the two exchange a cold greeting, with the ex surprised that Dylan slept with his best friend. They head outside, and Dylan tries to apologize, but she refuses to listen and drives off. Moments later, Abigail arrives, and they go to a pub to talk. He tells her about the infection, and Abigail jokes a bit about it. She confesses she got tested the year before and is negative. They're both relieved and continue catching up. Abigail and Dylan sit on a roadside bench and talk about the last time they met. She wants to know what happened with Jane, the girl he brought to the hotel, and all Dylan says is that she's a character. He goes back in time, 37 months earlier. Evie is in the toilet rehearsing a short speech on reaffirming that her friendship with someone hasn't gone deeper than it seems. She steps out of the toilet and meets Dylan in the bar, then tries to make her point, but Dylan keeps interrupting. He asks how she'd feel if she had more friends at her birthday, but she's fine with it being just the two of them. Just then, friends led by Luke enter to surprise her with a happy birthday, leaving her stunned. Luke says he has the perfect gift for her, honoring her wish of celebrating her birthday with a partner. He introduces her to Jono, a strange-looking guy, and in his attempt to sound intentional, Jono mentions going through her profile, leaving her even more shocked that Luke had set up a dating profile for her and had been operating it behind her back. At the birthday dinner, Helen talks about when Angus proposed to her, while Jono keeps trying to make it seem like he and Evie have hooked up, but she doesn't let him. Dylan is asked about his relationship, and he pats Jane's back and says they've been an item for a few weeks, then heads to the toilet. As Jono continues his futile attempts on Evie, Jane excuses herself and joins Dylan in the toilet, leaving Evie visibly unhappy. Jane begins kissing Dylan, even though he tries to resist. They keep kissing, and Dylan eventually settles in. He says he doesn't get why people care about beds when they can do the same thing. Standing, Jane decides to try something freaky, and they both fall to the ground, screaming from pain. With Angus listening at the door, they open it, hitting him and knocking him down. The door swings open, and Jane steps out with a broken finger while Dylan lies on the ground with his pants down, screaming. At the hospital, Dylan complains that Jane went too far by sticking her hands inside him, causing the accident. Helen is bossy and commanding with the woman at the desk, but the woman doesn't entertain her attitude. Dylan tries to talk to Angus, but he's too drunk to think straight. Luke is tired of Helen and seeks her permission to take Angus away for an hour, especially since the stern desk attendant said they won't see a doctor for 3 hours. Dylan and Evie step out for a brief chat. After he apologizes for ruining her birthday with his girlfriend, she cuts in, saying Jane can't possibly pass as his girlfriend. Just then, Luke returns with Angus and asks why Jono isn't there with Evie, but Evie expresses her displeasure that Luke set her up with someone like him. Luke pushes, and they all go inside just in time for the doctor to see Jane. Helen, scared of sitting near anyone who might give her a disease, places her bag on the seat next to her when she sees a man approaching. He arrives, stares at her, and she quickly removes her bag so he can sit. Moments later, he brings out a nylon bag and vomits into it. Horrified, she moves to another seat and asks her new seatmate if she has anything contagious before she sits. While Evie is reluctantly giving Jono a chance, the doctor calls Jane in, and Dylan follows despite her objections. Inside, the doctor struggles to find appropriate words for their case. Dylan clarifies how they ended up there, and when he calls Jane his girlfriend, she immediately corrects him, saying he's just one of the men she sleeps with. Dylan doesn't understand, and after a brief argument, the confused doctor proceeds with the examination. Even while she's being treated, Dylan keeps professing love, and Jane keeps rejecting it. Jono takes Evie to the rooftop for their date. Although she likes the concept, she's terrified of heights and keeps repeating it. Jono goes on about the view and how it feels like a picnic, just without grass or food. He tries to get something from inside and discovers the only door is locked from within. Evie panics and screams for help. They're stuck, so they sit and talk. Jono wonders why no one wants him. Not even Evie, despite him being open-minded and intelligent. She tells him she likes someone else, and that thoughts of that person cloud her mind so much she hardly sees anyone else. Just then, someone comes up for a smoke, finally letting them back inside. In the bathroom, Luke forces Angus to promise he'll sit him next to Katrina at the wedding, but Angus reminds him that Helen makes the final decisions. Luke doesn't care and splashes water on him to sober him up, making him promise anyway. Later, Angus feels better, and they talk about choosing someone to settle down with. Luke asks how Angus knew Helen was the one, and Angus tells the story. He was tying his shoelace when Helen approached with a ring and told him to stay in that position and propose. It felt right, so he did it and paid her back for the ring. Back at the reception, Dylan asks Jane how many guys she's seeing. She says 3, but she likes Dylan the most, and the others don't matter. He helps button her jacket, and just then, Dylan is called to see the doctor. As he goes in, Jane decides to show some care and follows him, holding his hand. She admits no one has treated her like he does, and says she wants to give in. Helen is going berserk at the receptionist and doctor, demanding they call her man in and attend to him. Angus and Luke walk in and watch the scene unfold. Luke comments that Helen would do anything for her man. Angus says that's what makes her perfect for him. Luke struggles for words and eventually calls her terrifying. When Angus asks Helen to seat Luke next to Katrina at the wedding, she immediately refuses. Dylan walks Jane out. He asks her to come with him to Angus's wedding, and she loves the idea, saying it's what couples do. He's hopeful their relationship will flourish, and Jane hopes so too. They kiss, and she leaves. Evie has been watching, and when Dylan approaches her, he tells her he made a birthday card for her and hopes she'll wait for it. She says she will, and her glowing eyes show her idea of waiting goes beyond the card. Back in the present, Dylan and Abigail continue their heart-to-heart talk. She's genuinely interested in him, but says whatever the outcome of their meeting, she'll take it well. Dylan doesn't mind seeing her again but says it only makes sense for him to abstain from anything until he's in perfect health. She agrees, and they continue talking. Dylan and Bethany sit in the compound garden while her baby crawls and plays nearby. She asks about his welfare aside from the infection, then cuts in to talk about how much she hates using protection when having sex. When she asks if he's seeing anyone, Dylan says no and admits he has fallen for someone else. Bethany doesn't let him finish before saying he has definitely fallen for his friend Evie, who is getting married. He goes back 4 years in time. Bethany is cooking in the kitchen, and Dylan shows up clearly not meeting her standards. She wants him to impress her brother so they will see she has found someone worth keeping. Dylan thinks it's too much pressure and asks her to tone it down. For Bethany, the dinner is a very big deal, but he hasn't realized that yet. She doesn't respond to him. Instead, she warns him not to say anything racial at dinner. Luke's company is having a dinner party, and he's enjoying himself at the bowling section. He tries buying drinks for some ladies, but they reject him immediately. He pushes further, but they remain unmoved. He turns to Evie, who he invited, and asks for advice. She tells him it's obvious they don't like him, but she's not too focused on that because she has work to do. A coworker tries to make a pass at Evie, but she shuts it down, and then takes cash from Luke to get drinks for the ladies. Luke insists she tells them he paid for the drinks, but she refuses, hoping to use the gesture to make them her friends. When she joins them, the women say Luke has done terrible things with them that they regret, but they refuse to explain. Evie tries to get them to talk, but they firmly say no. Bethany's brother Gareth arrives, and Dylan tries to show how friendly he is. As Gareth removes his coat, Dylan takes it to hang but notices many of Bethany's coats already there, and she says it aloud within Gareth's hearing. As they move further inside, Dylan tries to tap Gareth's back in a friendly way but accidentally touches his bum, making Gareth uncomfortable. Gareth sternly asks why he did that, and Dylan stutters, unable to explain, before walking away. At the table, Gareth asks how long Dylan and Bethany have been living together, and Dylan laughs. He insists they don't live together, and even when Bethany argues that spending much of her time in his house counts, he still disagrees, saying she doesn't even receive her mail there. Gareth asks his opinion on marriage and commitment, and Bethany thinks her brother is pushing too far. Gareth's phrasing, asking if Dylan will get behind Bethany, makes Dylan laugh, and when they probe, he says it sounded like a sex position. Meanwhile, Luke and the men sit talking about the ladies and why they are hostile towards him. One of the men claims Diana actually likes Luke, and that's why she's acting out. Luke believes it and blames himself for not noticing sooner. He promises to fix it immediately. As he walks toward Diana, Evie tries to stop him, but he brushes her aside and proceeds. The ladies remain hostile, but he ignores it and starts making sexual jokes, while they simply stare. Moments later, Evie and the men are in the restroom with Luke whining in pain from Diana's slap. They try to console him, but Evie mocks how loud the slap was. Evie says Diana has a grudge against him for something he did to her before they met at the company. Luke can't remember ever meeting her. He says he might have done the Dutch mud flap with someone before but doubts she'd be the type. Everyone there wants to know what that means except Evie, who leaves so she can still see Luke as a friend. She goes back to the game hall and realizes her camera is missing, so she starts searching. Dylan goes inside, and Bethany meets him with advice: just be himself, and her brother might like him. Dylan complains that being himself is hard because he loses concentration trying to stay focused. While he's at the table, his phone rings and it's Evie. Her camera was stolen, and she saw the thief on CCTV. She needs Dylan to bring her spare camera. Dylan leaves immediately despite Bethany stressing how important the dinner is. He gets to the game house and gives Evie her bag. but she notices it's incomplete. They start blaming each other when Luke arrives with his own crisis. He wants Dylan's help with the Diana situation since women love Dylan, but no one gives Luke attention. Evie panics because losing the camera might cost her the job and just wants a drink. She needs Dylan to buy one, since her wallet was in the stolen bag. But Dylan wants to return to dinner with Bethany and Gareth. They hug, and Dylan agrees to get them drinks. But Luke insists on staying to fix things with Diana. At the bar, Evie is sad about the missing expensive camera she bought using her dad's money. She tells Dylan he should get back to Bethany. Dylan asks if two people can live together without ever discussing it because he thinks that's what happened with Bethany. Evie reminds him he enabled it when he gave Bethany spare keys to the house. She tells him to go back to dinner. Just then, she spots the man who stole her camera and wants to confront him, but Dylan stops her. He wants them to plan properly, but Evie only cares about getting her camera back. As he tries to hold her back, his phone rings, and it's Bethany. She wants him home but keeps hearing Evie's voice in the background, which makes it sound suspicious. Luke approaches Diana and apologizes for things he can't remember doing. He talks about the time he used a lady's curtain to clean up after sex, and says sorry just in case she was the one. But Diana says no, she's finally ready to reveal what actually happened. She says it happened 2 years ago, and Samuel, the colleague known for remembering dates, reminds everyone they were all in France that day, so Luke couldn't have been the man in question. Though Luke always mocks Samuel's memory, this time he supports him. Diana apologizes for wrongly accusing Luke all this time. In minutes, she and Luke are kissing aggressively in a staff-only section. After they finish, Luke asks what the mystery man did to her, and she says it was something he called a Dutch mud flap. Luke instantly knows it was him, but keeps quiet. When he asks the exact time again, she changes it to 3 years ago instead of 2. Dylan and Luke sneak closer to the thief. Dylan wants a cautious approach, but Evie yells for the thief to return her camera. Soon they're all dragging it, and when she kicks the man, he slaps Dylan. The police step in and ask them to identify the files on the camera. The thief goes first, claiming it's photos of random people. Evie, nervous because she's unsure what's there, says the same. The officer scrolls through and finds Dylan's pictures everywhere. Evie breaks into a smile, and the officer hands her the camera. Dylan and Evie walk home, and she's very grateful he helped. When they enter, Bethany welcomes them. They both apologize for ruining the dinner. Bethany smiles, but realizes she will always come second to Evie. After Evie leaves, Bethany opens up about how important the night was and how it got ruined. Dylan apologizes again. Back in the present, Dylan is glad Bethany is doing well. She asks if he's open to talking to Evie about his feelings. He refuses because Evie loves Mal, who he sees as a good guy. Bethany advises him not to linger around someone who won't return his feelings, or he'll miss out on better things. Dylan wakes up with Abigail in bed, and jokingly she asks what he gave her this time. He plays along, saying he can offer breakfast in bed, or herpes, if he even had that. They laugh, and she gets ready for work. They head out and meet Angus on the couch. When Dylan introduces them, Angus reminds everyone he's only sleeping on their couch temporarily. Abigail remembers Angus's wedding, which makes him sad again. So Dylan walks her out to avoid upsetting him the more. Before she leaves, she kisses Dylan and tells him not to wait 3 years before contacting her again. He agrees. Over breakfast, they talk about Dylan's list of women to contact, and Phoebe's name comes up. Dylan says he has tried reaching her, but her number no longer works. Luke suggests they visit her parents' place since she lived there the last time they were together. On the way, Dylan tells Luke that Evie tested negative for the infection, but he doesn't understand why Luke is suddenly eager to see her. They knock at the door, and an old woman answers. Dylan says he's looking for Phoebe, but she stays silent. Moments later, they're inside, and the atmosphere is melancholic. Everyone waits for her to speak. Something terrible has happened, but she calmly asks how they knew Phoebe. He goes back in time, 5 years ago. At the bar when Evie and Dylan return with drinks, she asks about Phoebe. Dylan says she's cool, but feels something is off. Evie teases him with odd questions about Phoebe's body, but she's just joking. They talk about Evie and Angus's new relationship. She doesn't have butterflies, but thinks Angus is cool. At the bar, a quizmaster is asking questions. While everyone is eager to participate, Angus keeps bragging about how strong his relationship with Evie is. He compares them to Prince William and Kate, and while he revels in it, Luke and Phoebe cut him off, urging him to focus on the quiz. Luke and Phoebe answer a question correctly and laugh together. Evie notices something and pulls Dylan aside. She tells him Phoebe is basically the female version of Luke. Dylan disagrees, but watching how well Phoebe and Luke bond starts to confirm it. He starts panicking and excuses himself to the toilet. Angus meets him there, and Dylan says he can't date someone who reminds him too much of Luke. He wants to break up with her and begs Angus not to tell Luke the reason. Angus then brings up his own worry. Evie kissed him on the forehead instead of the lips, and he feels weird about it. They return to the table, and Angus pulls Evie away to talk. She thinks he's about to propose, but he actually wants to tell her he got a job in another city. While he expects a bad reaction, she's genuinely happy for him. Luke and Phoebe focus only on the quiz. When they get a difficult question, Dylan gives the right answer, but the two ignore him and stick to their own choices. Angus and Evie return to share the good news. Seeing how awkward the atmosphere is, she takes Angus away to enjoy their night. Luke and Phoebe are shocked that anyone would leave a quiz halfway. Their synchrony makes Dylan uneasy, so he heads home. On the way, he tells Evie and Angus that she's right, and Phoebe really is Luke's female version. Back at the bar, Luke and Phoebe answer another question, and in a moment of excitement, almost kiss but pull back. At home, Evie encourages Angus to take the job and keep their memories, even if it ends their relationship. Dylan panics about breaking up with Phoebe because he can't date Luke's female twin. With Angus leaving, Dylan tells Evie she might be doing too much trying to push him away. She says the news has her emotional. Dylan tells her she deserves someone who makes her feel safe, and he deserves someone who doesn't remind him of his best friend. Later, the quizmaster announces a tie, so he asks one final question. Luke and Phoebe put their heads together, and when the result is announced, they win. They hug in excitement and accidentally kiss passionately but quickly correct themselves. Luke even says he loves her, then clarifies he means during quizzes. On the way home, Phoebe wants to address the kiss, but Luke wants to erase it from memory, even though she knows it's nearly impossible. They arrive home to find Dylan waiting to speak with her. Inside Dylan's room, Phoebe takes the lead and praises him, but admits she doesn't care much for relationships. She says if anything could change her, it would have been him, but she's still the same. She can't be with him now or ever. Dylan tries to give a speech, but she cuts him off, and they end with a hug. He returns to the sitting room to tell his friends what happened. Moments later, Angus enters with news. He took Evie's advice and followed his dreams, and that dream is Evie. He declined the new job and bought tickets for them to go on a surprise vacation. He hugs her, but Evie can't pretend and quickly says she misplaced her passport. Angus says he has it, brandishes it, and runs off to prepare. Luke hugs Dylan, offering comfort and promising to take him out the next day. Evie packs for the trip, but promises to break up with Angus when they return. She wonders how she ended up in this situation, and Dylan reminds her it's because she didn't want to break a friend's heart. They both vow never to date within their circle again, then hug. Back to the present. Luke finally confesses he kissed Phoebe at the bar. He blames Dylan for falling for the wrong women, because he's too picky and then ends up ruining other people's chances. They scuffle after Luke shoves him on the bed, stopping only when Phoebe's mom steps in. They admit they both loved her daughter. Luke insists Dylan should have told Evie his feelings, accusing him of letting fear ruin things. Dylan says he's moving on with Abigail, but Luke doesn't believe him. Dylan and Evie go out for a drink. They're happy to see each other doing well. Evie says her closest friend should be maid of honor, but he's a man, so that won't work, but she still needs him close that day. She talks about how Mal is dependable and how excited she is for this new phase of her life. Just then, Luke walks into the bar and without hesitation tells Evie that Dylan has always been in love with her and that his misery comes from hiding it. He knows Dylan will regret letting her go, so he's speaking up for him. Tears run down Evie's cheeks as she asks Dylan softly if it's true. Dylan doesn't speak, but the tears streaming down his own face confirm everything. He's deeply in love with her.